Professor Dilip Menon from the University of Witwatersrand, Johannesburg. Professor M.V. Narayanan, Vice Chancellor, Sri Shankaracharya. Sorry. We are now pleased. Now Professor Savita Singh, Professor from IGNOU. Now I request. We are now pleased to invite Muhammad Niyaz Ashraf, one of the conveners of this international conference and a faculty member from the Department of History at GITAM School of Humanities and Social Sciences, to deliver the welcome address and the concept note of the conference.
Esteemed guests, speakers, the scholars, and all the participants, a very warm good morning. It's truly an honor to stand here and deliver the welcome speech to a very diverse and esteemed gathering who all come here for our first international conference, Modernities Redefined, Perspective from South Asia. So on behalf of GSHS, the GITAM School of Humanities and Social Science, I welcome our esteemed inaugural speaker, Professor M.V. Narayanan, the Vice Chancellor of Sri Shankaracharya Sanskrit University, Kaladi. He has accepted our invitation in a call. It's in a WhatsApp call, and thanks a lot, sir, for accepting our invitation. On behalf of GSHS again, I am welcoming both the keynote speakers. Very similarly, they also agreed to come in an email and in a phone call, and they traveled such a long distance, maybe more than 24 hours of flight journey to come to our GITAM University. I welcome both of you for our first international conference. I welcome our Pro-VC, KNS. We all know who are sitting here that his inspiration for this conference is worth mentioning. So when we went to him and we told him about, so we are planning for an international conference, he asked that, how many people you are expecting? I said, sir, we are expecting only 24 presenters, and we will do it in 8 panels in 2 days. Then he asked that, why are you dreaming, like you have to be ambitious in your academic career. Like, you have to do a conference, something in an extravagant style. In his all support and his inspiration, we have received around 350 abstracts worldwide, and he also asked us to make it sure that you are giving the best during the international conference. He asked all the leadership, in the leadership meeting, he already asked all the GSHS people to the GITAM school, all the GITAM universities to support us in all the ways they can, and it become this much because of his. I welcome you, sir, for our first international conference. I'm also welcome Professor Savita Singh, who agreed to come and deliver her keynote address yesterday for our young scholars meet, which we thought that after getting the 350 abstracts, we are in a dilemma that there are around 60 to 70 abstracts are from postgraduate students. So, and we thought that, okay, why can't we take some high exceptionally qualified papers to be present in GITAMs as a pre-conference event, she agreed in a mail that she can come here and deliver the keynotes and inspire our research scholars or the postgraduate students with her. It was a marvelous keynote yesterday and very theoretically one. And thanks for coming to GITAM as well. Finally, I would like to invite our leader and our director, Dr. Madhavi Nagandi, to our first GSS conference. And thanks for all your support and unwavering leadership since last 6 months you are giving to us. I heartily welcome you on behalf of GSHS as well. And for all of you who are sitting here, the directors from GST, GSB, and the Principal of Sciences, I warmly welcome all of you to here, and our resident director is also here. I welcome all of you on behalf of GSHS. Thanks all of you, my colleagues, volunteers, and all the participants who traveled all over from India to GITAM University to have a very much intellectual discussion in the coming next 2 days. I also have the responsibility to speak about what exactly this conference means, like why we are doing this Modernities Redefined. So the question is that us, GITAM School of Humanities and Social Science is a school with 7 different disciplines. We thought that what can we do a kind of multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary topic. So one thing come to our mind is, why can't we deal with modernities? Not modernity, which a European-centric view, we have to challenge it. And we specifically wants us to situate the GITAM School of Humanities and Social Science as one of the best center for studies in South Asian studies in India. So this is our first step, that we are coming with a interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary center for engaging in research activity. So when this modernity, we are actually trying to see that how modernities has been experienced, or how modernities has been experienced and redefined in South Asia in multiple ways. Our aim is to transcend traditional narratives, a plurality of perspectives and voices that reflect complex realities of the different regions in South Asia, especially the local regions. So if you go through all the schedule, the panels and papers, you can see that we can see how different communities, different regions, different localities, and different individuals engage, negotiate, and challenge the idea of modernity in multiple ways. So in yesterday's keynote address, we have heard that Professor Savita Singh was engaging deeply with Raja Ram Mohan Roy's idea of modernity in a way that how he used hermeneutics to come into the picture. So if you look from that perspective, we can see that Modernities Redefined perspective from South Asia seeks to explore the multifaceted nature of modernities within the context of South Asia, which has to revisit several historical narratives by examining the historical trajectories of modernity, its colonial legacies, and indigenous knowledge systems and cultural exchanges happened since long time. If you remember, like, we have an early modernities which has been deeply researched by scholars like Sajay Subramaniam and later on. So we have 2 speakers who actually knows much better, and we are also looking forward for your keynote speak, where you can actually enlighten us with more different perspectives and facets of voices and perspectives of South Asia. Once again, I extend my heartfelt welcome to all participants and express my gratitude for your invaluable contributions to the critical discourse. I also hope that for the next 2 days, we will have a wonderful intellectual discussions going to happen in different venues, 4 different venues in 24 panels, and all the best for the paper presenters. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir, for sharing the concept note with the audience. We are delighted to have Dr. Madhavi Nagandi, the director in charge of GITAM School of Humanities and Social Sciences, GSHS, to share insights about our institution and the diverse range of programs offered at GSHS Bengaluru.
Good morning. Good morning, all the dignitaries present here. My warm welcome to all the keynote speakers, Professor Saurabh Dubey, from A College de Mexico, Professor Dilip Menon, University of Witwatersrand, Professor M.V. Narayanan, Vice Chancellor, Sri Shankaracharya University of Sanskrit, and special invitee, Professor Savita Singh from Gender and Development Studies, IGNOU. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation. And my deep appreciation and for the determined leaders of our GITAM. Firstly, Mr. Sri Bharat, President GITAM, Professor Dayananda Siddhartham, Vice Chancellor, Professor Gunashekaran, Registrar, Professor Kamaya Bandi, Dean of School of Humanities and Social Sciences, and our beloved Professor K.N.S. Acharya, Pro-Vice Chancellor, GITAM Bengaluru. This particular conference has been conceived 6 months back, the idea of having a kind of commonality for all the sciences, management, humanities, and engineering together. It is the era of multidisciplinary and also common approaches to come together and do research, teaching, and also the kind of interactions that has to happen on one common ground. When the school started, it may be at very humble beginning with a less number of students, but it is very, very important for all the streams, as the humanities and social science subjects are important in every field of study. Maybe lately realized in our education system, it has come up slowly, but it is taking up very fast and also highest growth in this particular area. Much discussions will happen during the sessions, but still, I just want to inform, or maybe take a promise, that our vision for the school is to establish a uniform platform gathering all the distinguished scholars, experts in humanities and social sciences. This is through exchange of knowledge and expertise, and we want to establish a Center for South Asian Studies in GITAM, Bengaluru. Yes. Through this, we want to connect the teaching, learning, and research through collaborations with multiple universities within the country, across the world, so that we can have a common understanding how to go about and also contribute to different other disciplines. Exploring the depths of one's inner reality to cultivate a culture of kindness and compassion while fostering honesty and integrity through the systems and synergies of practice and knowledge is the main motto through which our school can contribute and also help every other discipline. I'm happy that our faculty, all the faculty in different 7 departments are coming together doing this particular event as one single department. I congratulate the faculty and also the students, and I'm very happy that the whole campus is encouraging the school and faculty to go further. And I congratulate all the participants and whoever has come here to present papers. Because of you, this particular, whatever we are conceiving the idea will come into reality. I thank all the chairs of the sessions, those are going to do the sessions and listening to those presentations keenly, and then bring it into a form of concrete idea to go further, to take it in the form of practice for teaching and research. Thank you. I congratulate everyone to come here, and also thanks everyone.
Thank you, ma'am, for elaborating on the significance of our school within the GITAM ecosystem. We kindly request Dr. K.N.S. Acharya, the Pro-Vice Chancellor of GITAM, Bengaluru, to deliver the presidential address.
Good morning to all of you. Can you just increase the volume a little bit? Can you hear me? The back? No? Yeah, thank you. First of all, on behalf of the management, I would warmly welcome dignitaries on the dais, Professor Narayanan, for having accepted our invitation to be amongst us today. Professor Saurabh Dubey, Professor Dilip Menon, Professor Savita, they're all what they look, what they are. If you sit next to them, you will get that vibration. That's all I can say. We are very, very deeply honored to have them amongst us. A very big round of applause to them for having accepted to be with us. The journey for this international workshop started about 4 months back. And when the team came, the young and energetic team of our School of Humanities came, starting to discuss on we want to do this, I just asked 4 questions to them. Why do you want to do it? How do you want to do it? What you want to do? And with whom you want to do? And for all the 4 questions, I knew they were underprepared. And the only message I gave to them was, low aim is crime, aim high. And I'm today extremely proud of this team because the challenge they took on their shoulders and to make it a truly international conference is evident with the kind of people they have been able to invite and gracefully have them on the stage. It's truly international. You can see Professor Saurabh has come all the way from Mexico. We have Professor Dilip Menon coming from South Africa, and our own Professor Narayanan from Kaladi, the Sanskrit University. It's a true amalgamation of international speakers of repute for a global cause, right? That is the aim that we started, and I think the team has really done that. It's a very, very proud moment for all of us today. Yesterday on the lunch table, myself, Professor Savita and Professor Narayanan were discussing on how the society today does not understand much of the relevance of social sciences and humanities. The students today, the community at large does not really understand much of how things are so deep-rooted in our culture. And especially if you see the title, it is Modernities for Southeast Asia, right? The kind of literature, kind of deep social values that we have, I think Westerners have done much more research on us than we doing ourselves research on us. And at my home, thanks to my dear father who was a scholar by himself, we have a very huge library, 25,000 books at home, one entire floor. And whenever I get time over the weekends, I just go and sit there and just take out some of these books. I was stunned and still in awe to find out that all over the world, there are authors from multiple countries, be it American, be it European, be it the South American countries. The kind of work that they have done on Indian culture, Indian literature, Indian mythology is way beyond what we have done ourselves. And my father had a very rare habit of collecting those books which are actually written by non-Indians to see what is their perspective of looking at our culture and our literature and other things. So I just did mention to Professor Narayanan that we have a book at home. It is a 10-volume book. I was just glancing through. This person, I think the name of the author is Thibault, if I remember right. He has done a comparative study of every word, etymology of the Rigveda mandala, word by word by word. Where does it appear, in which mandala, in what context it is being taken. He has produced it in 10 volumes. We don't know. We ourselves don't know. So when so much of interest is in them to study about our culture, our modernities, why we should not do it? I think if these kind of international workshops can kindle that kind of interest in all the young generation, including people of our generation, I think we have done a fantastic job. There is a school near Madurantakam in Chennai, and also in Kumbakonam, which is in Tamil Nadu, where some of these Sanskrit Pathashalas, there you will not believe, some of you, if you want to go, please go and see there. Kids, all the age group from all the way from 3 years age group up to about 15 to 18 years age group, they are completely, it's a residential school, and the kind of rounded personalities they develop, and as a large scale university, we should be ashamed of. They not only give full education free, and that education is not necessarily only job oriented, but they teach the entire value system of life. They teach computers, they teach science, they teach mathematics, and on top of that, all the Indian mythologies, Vedic literature, everything. And for a kid of 4-year-old, all the way up to 15 years, by the time they complete the 15th or 18th year, there are kids who are Ganapatis. If those who understand Vedic culture, Ganapatis, they can recite all the 72 kind of Yajurveda by heart with Padapata. You can break it into parts, and then kids at 15-year age. And when you look at them, you feel, how is it possible? That is the power of mind. Now, through these workshops, through these international conferences, through the culture on the campus, if we can create those kind of small groups of intellectuals, I think we are going to do a human service to the society. We don't want only people who are passionate about computers. We don't want people who are passionate only about the technological evolution, but we want people who are passionate about a good rounded personality who are able to do everything. That is the desperate, dire need of the society today. And I really hope that the School of Social Sciences and Humanities, the aspiration that we have kept is, through our liberal education model, we are able to kindle those kind of interests across all other schools of the GITAM University. I once again heartily welcome all the guests on the stage, and also congratulate the School of Humanities and Social Sciences for this wonderful international workshop, and wish them many more. God bless. Jai Hind.
Thank you very much, sir, for your kind words and steadfast support throughout. It is our privilege to have with us Professor M.V. Narayanan, Vice-Chancellor of Sri Shankaracharya University of Sanskrit, Kerala, as our inaugural speaker. We welcome you, sir, to initiate the inaugural address on the occasion of our first international conference on Modernities Redefined, Perspective from South Asia.
Professor K.N.S. Acharya, Professor Savida Singh, Professor Saurabh Dubey, Professor Dilip Menon, Professor Madhavi, fellow faculty members, researchers, participants in the conference, students and friends. Let me at the beginning itself apologize for my rather sore-sounding voice. I'm not doing too well with my chest condition. I have just recovered or slightly recovering from a chest infection. So if my voice happens to break in the middle, please bear with me. A few prayers may actually help for me to tide over these rather difficult circumstances. Let me also say that it's a huge honor, a great privilege to be here, especially because this is the first international conference on the social sciences and humanities front being conducted by GITAM University, and that it is also somewhat on a topic or an area of great interest to me. So I consider this, in a manner of speaking, not just as me participating in this as a guest, but as most of you are doing, I'm also a participant. And I expect to be part of the discourse, the debate, involved as much as any one of you is. Now, I would probably release Professor Dilip and Professor Dubey from having to sit there if they would like to go and sit downstairs, or if you want to continue sitting there, it's okay. That's fine. Okay. I find it very difficult to sit up there, and so I thought probably I should extend the same courtesy to them too, that's all. All right. I think the area of this conference, to a great extent, captures one of the most important anxieties that we find, particularly in the discourses of social sciences and humanities, not just in South Asia, not just in India, but probably the entirety of the non-West. And that's probably because the idea of modernity, as has been brought to our shores and to the shores of the non-West through the agencies of colonialism and imperialism, have radically transformed our lives, have changed our lives, both in terms of epistemological concerns as well as in terms of experiential structures. But at the same time, there is a very fundamental question that comes up, whether we are consumers of that modernity, we are merely objects of that modernity, or whether it is possible for us to be subjects of that. same time, at the very center of Western modernity was the idea of cogito humanitas, of the thinking man, encapsulated in the famous dictum of Descartes, I think, therefore I am. This thinking man was deemed capable of realizing the full potential of what it means to be human through his intellect, the expression of which is to be found in the various knowledge systems, especially the sciences, which arose at the time and came to be identified as fundamentally modern in nature. With nothing less than the fundamental human being as its central tenet, it is not surprising that one of the major characteristics of modernity has been its representation of itself as the expression of a universal state to be desired. And this is probably the most important thing that we may need to address, that within modernity itself, Western modernity itself, there is a self-consciousness of its own universality, that it applies not just to the West, but it is a desirable state. It is a state to be achieved, as Anthony Giddens and other theoreticians have put. It is a matter of going through various stages till you finally reach that desired state of modernity, and every society, almost like in a social Darwinist manner, can move through these processes till they finally reach and achieve the state of modernity. It is not surprising that one of the major characteristics of modernity has been its representation of itself as the expression of a universal state to be desired, or the expression of a universal certainty, whether it be the certainty of human reason freed from particular traditions, or of technological power freed from the constraints of the natural world. So its history has always claimed to be a homogeneous, universal one, in fact, the only universal history. Colonization and imperialism have given truth to these claims, some truth at least, awarding the forms and categories of Western modernity a global significance. The history of the West thus came to be written as the history of the world. The inevitable result of this European-centered cartography of modernity and its conception of a singular universal history has been that the modern came to be associated with the rise and the expansion of the West. And for most of the last 2 centuries, the conceptual categories of Western modernity have been deployed without much alteration as an abiding framework for grasping the political, economic, technological, and cultural changes in societies outside the West. Excuse me. However, as I said at the very beginning, in more recent times, this approach has come to be challenged for its strong undercurrents of legitimation of Western dominance and its inability to account for the multiplicity of human cultures. As an internal critique of Western modernity, Ursula Vogel would put it, a central failure of the Enlightenment is its incapacity to deal with human difference and diversity. The consequences of this failure seem nowhere more apparent than in the question of Europe's relationship to non-European peoples and cultures. The alleged insensitivity of 18th century thinking to the intrinsic value of cultural difference is commonly attributed to its universalist frameworks of inquiry, to its abstract conceptions of a uniform and invariable human nature, and to the grand narratives of a progressive history of human civilization, a linear history which is a clear teleology, and where, in one way or another, you achieve that end which is always prognosticated from the beginning itself. What is at issue in this critical portrayal of Enlightenment legacies is not merely the epistemological inadequacy of universalist presuppositions to the task of understanding foreign cultures in their own terms. Enlightenment universalism is seen to have fostered modes of thinking which in the following 2 centuries would all too often serve to legitimate European global dominance and to conceal the histories of destruction that were entailed in it. These are the words of none other than a European, Ursula Vogel, who actually mounted a critique of the entire Enlightenment rationality and its singular narrative of a global modernity, with which she says put man at the center, where man has to be seen in a gendered fashion as man alone and not woman. And when it comes down further, it means Western man. And even when it means Western man, it only means ultimately a few Western men who belong to a certain class. It is especially in the context of studies of colonial modernity that this awareness has played a crucial role. Where in the earlier notion that colonial modernity articulates a fact that non-European societies had experienced cultural and social transformation comparable to European societies, although they might differ substantially, has come to be criticized with vehemence. And probably the best example of that is someone you all know, or if you don't, you should know. As Partha Chatterjee explains in his now extremely famous essay, and rather contested essay, Our Modernity, he says, there cannot be just one modernity, irrespective of geography, time, environment, or social conditions. The forms of modernity will have to vary between different countries, depending upon specific circumstances and social practices. We need to assert that true modernity consists in determining the particular forms of modernity that are suitable in particular circumstances. That is, applying the methods of reason to identify or invent the specific technologies of modernity that are appropriate for our purposes. Or to put it another way, if there is any universally acceptable definition of modernity, it is this: that by teaching us to employ the methods of reason, universal modernity enables us to identify the forms of our own particular modernity. Let me repeat that, because this is something we'll have to come back to later. By teaching us to employ the methods of reason, universal modernity enables us to identify the forms of our own particular modernity. It is not surprising then that more recent approaches to the problem have come up with concepts such as multiple modernities, alternative modernities, vernacular modernities, modernities at large, and the rather vexed term, which I have serious reservations about, indigenous modernities, and so on and so forth, as ways of acknowledging the importance and variation of non-European developments and emphasizing the variety of local, regional, and global forces whose combinations shape the particular histories of modernity, producing different versions in different places. But even these conceptualizations are not without their problems, because in some of them there lies implicit the notion of a central, singular narrative of modernity to which there are local alternatives. That is usually what happens. There is a central, universal narrative of modernity, or a single narrative of modernity, probably in a global scale, probably in a national scale, probably in a provincial scale, and to which there are local alternatives. But in some others, there is a celebration of a boundless plurality that renders almost impossible any reasonable grounds, structures of general validity that would facilitate theorization. So how are we to conceptualize other modernities? And this is where the whole conference is probably pitched. So how are we to conceptualize other modernities? And in specific, our own modernity. Taking the cue from Partha Chatterjee, that we have been decreed to be consumers of modernity, several theorists have addressed the question. Have we been producers of modernity, or as opposed to being merely its consumers? Or to put it differently, would we have had a modernity in India had no colonization taken place? This is a question that is oft repeated. Would we have had a modernity in India had no colonization taken place? Or are there paradigms of modernity in India that are not impinged upon by the structures of colonial modernity, or those that have been able to circumvent, sidestep the structures of modernity. Such questions can be addressed only by looking at practices and discourses that either predate the arrival of colonial modernity or that which formed distinct enclaves within the cultural life of our societies that sidestepped or remained largely untouched by the practices, concepts, and ideas of Western modernity, or put forward epistemological and experiential structures that were distinctly at variance with the Western. Needless to say, such an enterprise would entail a search for local paradigms of modernity that cannot be reduced to the configurations or perceived from the perspectives of a colonial modernity. The political validity of such a search lies in the fact that it would be, as Partha Chatterjee put it in his memorial lecture, applying the methods of reason to identify or invent the specific technologies of modernity that are appropriate for our purposes. At the same time, I would submit that such efforts have to take into account three primarily conceptual issues. The first is that they will have to be informed and constrained by the fact that our current understanding of modernity is still quite conditioned by the hegemonic epistemology of Western modernity, and that the theoretical matrices, categories, and terminology with which we can conceptualize are almost exclusively that of Western or colonial modernity. We would indeed need to use them as a starting point, probably just a dispensable starting point, but in the light of them or their underlying rationale, attempt to find resonant experiences in our discourses and practices, but which are at the same time distinctive and different in terms of the specificities of our histories and locations. Not only that, it would also entail the identification or isolation of associative features and characters that describe these experiences that would help us to identify the constellations of ideas and practices that form our own distinct modernities. Now, such an attempt can be made only if it is possible for us to formulate a language of modernity that is current to us, that is relevant to us, and through which we can actually speak, probably in our languages, probably in our vernaculars, but probably even in English, where it is a distinctly different vocabulary, a different kind of, shall we say, theoretical discourse that steps away from the Western and creates a theoretical model for ourselves. The crucial question here is, can we theorize? Are we able to theorize? And that will have to be answered as part of this. Second, such an attempt will perforce have to proceed from an understanding that modernity is not an absolute state, but a relative condition to be ascertained in terms of a process of change that can only be defined in terms of a departure, a shift from a condition previous and different to it. Needless to say, this would mean that the nature of any modernity can only be described in terms of what it departs from. It's a historical context, what it departs from what it ventures to replace, thus giving it a very distinctive local habitation and rationale. Naturally, following from the above, we may also need to disabuse ourselves of the idea that modernity is a macro phenomenon, a cohesive, homogeneous process, a particular temporal stage in the comprehensive development of a society that has contiguous effects in all areas of life and experience, and contemplate the possibility of it being a number of discontinuous processes occurring at different times in different discourses and practices, each determined by the specific conditions and processes of its particular habitat. Now, having said this, and having looked at some attempts at isolating such experiences of modernity in our own lives, both in contemporary life as well as in the lives of people who have gone before, during the colonial times and predating the colonial times, there are a few questions that will need to be asked, a few hard questions. Questions that participants here, in terms of their own work, will need to ask themselves. When, as Partha Chatterjee advises, we employ the methods of reason to identify the forms of our own particular modernity, what would such an identification entail? As has already been manifested in several efforts, this will mean that we will be able to identify intimations of modernity in several local structures of change that were largely in response to certain particularly local concerns, which were relatively untouched by the knowledge or the experiential structures of the West. But at the same time, this has resulted, no doubt, this has resulted in very fruitful, For instance, if I am to speak of the province of writing and the arts, this could be in the search for the formation of a conception of the self, of an individual subjectivity, and the attendant notions and articulations of an inner depth or internal conflict, or of a developing self-consciousness in terms of both the subject as well as the form of the discourse, or of individual expressions of individual romantic love and conceptions of beauty, all of which depart from earlier conventional expressions of the self and its manifestations. No doubt, this has resulted in very fruitful discoveries of the inscriptions of modernity in the works of people like Narayana Guru in Kerala or Kumaran Ashan in the late 19th and the early 20th century, or in the works of Subramanya Bharati in the 19th century Tamil Nadu, just to mention a few from South India. However, when Sheldon Pollock discovers indications of modernity in the Sanskrit poetry of Jagannatha Pandita of the 17th century, especially in the subjective individual ethos of Bhamini Vilasa, a memoir of his dear departed first wife, or when a deeply conflicted internal life and self-consciousness of both character and form can be discovered in the 17th century Nalacharidam of Unnai Warrior, I believe we have to be a little conscious. If we are to treat modernity as a set of signs, as an index of attributes, or as a registry of aspects, the presence of some of which vouches for the presence of modernity, it may not be entirely impossible then to import Andal or Vajana Sahitya into the modernist canon, given that we may be able to discover in them too signs that indicate aspects of modernity. What I'm trying to indicate here is that a very empirical kind of method where you reduce modernity into a set of signs, into a registry, into an index, into a repository of characteristics, and trying to find one-to-one correspondence between this index and the works themselves and identify them as modernity, there is a huge danger. Anything and everything can be brought into modernity. And by bringing anything and everything into modernity, we risk the danger of losing the very sharpness of that category, the very meaningfulness, the utility of that very conceptual category. That will be rather counterproductive because the very category of modernity will be somewhat tenuous, if not amorphous. We need to be historical and capture the process that went into the making of such signs or aspects rather than focus on the product of what is seen in those particular discourses. Another question which needs to be asked is whether there is a valorization, an implicit sense that being modern is somehow qualitatively better, superior, or even more desirable than being traditional, pre-modern, or non-modern. Is there a latent teleology or a linearity in this desire? We have to be modern. Do we have to be modern? Such valorizations or tendencies towards that can be very problematic. For instance, if I may give a little example here, a very contradictory example. For instance, the Vaikam Satyagraha of Kerala has always been seen as a major event or a major episode in the formation of modernity in Kerala, especially the dismantling of the structures of caste. The Vaikam Satyagraha was a huge struggle from the Dalit community, the so-called lower caste community, demanding the right to actually walk the precincts around the temple, the roads around the temple. Once that was allowed, later it gathered more force, and later on in Guruvayur, in Chendamangalam, these struggles developed till the temple entry proclamation came to be there, and everyone was allowed entry into the temples. Now, this struggle for temple entry undoubtedly can be considered a major chapter in the Renaissance of Kerala. There is no doubt regarding its value in the democratization and the dismantling of the caste structures of Kerala is concerned. However, a question arises, as some people have posted, by incorporating non-caste Hindus into the temple system, did it in due course of time also lead to the formation of a larger Hindu community, sections of which came to be deployed as a political Hindu community that cut across caste barriers, especially in the case of the recent incident of Sabarimala? So what is modern in this? Is Vaikam Satyagraha modern? And in which case, what happened subsequently? What ensued from it? How do we place it? Do we place it as modern, the formation of a political Hindu community that is fed into the larger Hindutva structures themselves? Do we place them as modern? This question assumes great significance, especially when it is realized that in its reinvention of traditions and the past, and its none too veiled connections with global capital, Hindutva is undoubtedly modern. And then, is resistance to Hindutva anti-modern? That's a question we may have to ask. The fourth question is, what is the role of our subjectivity in the identification of structures of modernity? When Partha Chatterjee speaks about we have to identify our own forms of modernity, who are the we? Who are the we that Partha Chatterjee speaks of? Who are the we that we understand from that peroration? Is it a we that is burdened by a nation state? Is it a we that has been constructed as a result of the discourses of the nation state? Or is it a localized we? Or is it a caste-ridden we? What is it we? Is there an assumption of an imposed homogeneity in that we? Who are the we? Is it a citizen of the national state? Or is it some other person who finds identification in terms of an imagined community? One can help but feel that there is a compulsion of the ideology of the nation state here that prompts us to search for modernity. Is modernity then more a matter of our perception? So then the question comes up, is modernity more a matter of our own perception than the experience of the people and processes that we identify as modern? One of the greatest, shall we say, discoveries, or shall I say, breakthroughs of phenomenology is the breaking apart of the subject-object divide and seeing phenomena as that which are created by the coming together of the object and the subject. That you come into being because I see you, and that I see because you see me. This subject-object relationship, are we getting out of that, and where it is our subjective perception which is focusing upon a certain experience, fixing it as modern, because we prefer to see something as modern and prefer not to see something else as modern. And finally, my question which I posed in the middle, do we need to be modern? And if we do, why do we need to be modern? This, I believe, is a question we need to ask, not to reject modernity, not at all. In fact, in order to create a sustained, valuable, valid idea of modernity, we need to ask these primary questions ourselves. Why do we need to be modern? And what is that modernity which is specific and important to us? I think I've taken more than the time that was allotted to me. with great happiness and privilege and honor, I declare this international conference open. Thank you very much.
We are grateful to you for your enlightening speech and encouraging words. As we inch closer to the end of the inaugural session, we would like to request our faculty from the Department of English, GSHS, and one of the conveners of the conference, Dr. Shweta Mukherjee, to formally end this session with the deliverance of the vote of thanks.
A very good morning, everyone. No research has studied audience behavior during vote of thanks. My personal research, however, tells me that vote of thanks usually receives the least attention in any event, especially after such an enlightening introductory lecture, and I'm sure we're all looking forward to more. But we believe that gratitude is a very, very significant emotion. And we would request all of you to be patient for a few more minutes while we express our gratitude to each and every one of you who is present here today. Dreams are not what you see in your sleep. Dreams are things which do not let you sleep. This conference is a testimony to the power of dreams, and hence it is imperative that we begin this conference by thanking everybody who has made it possible. On behalf of the entire conference committee and GITAM School of Humanities and Social Sciences, it is my honor and privilege to thank our inaugural speaker, Professor M.V. Narayanan, who graciously accepted our invitation, has traveled a long way to address us and be with us. Sir, you have definitely helped us set the tone of the conference. We sincerely thank you for being with us here today. I also take this opportunity to thank our keynote speakers, Professor Saurav Dubey, Professor Dilip Menon, and Professor Savita Singh, and all our guests, speakers, chairs, and delegates who have come to GITAM from different parts of the world and from different parts of Bangalore, which is, trust me, not an easy task. Your presence here reinstates our belief in the need for such discourses in academia. We welcome you here and thank you for being with us. Our president, Sri Bharat M., is a true visionary who believes in the power of discourses and has been a source of our motivation and encouragement to all of us at GITAM. We thank him for continuing to be a support for us. We place before him our deepest gratitude and ensure him that we will live the vision of this university in everything that we do. We are extremely fortunate to be led by an exemplary leader, our Chancellor, Professor Virender Singh Chauhan, whose conviction in creating holistic individuals for a better tomorrow has fueled us with the desire to understand ourselves and others better. We thank him for giving us a purpose to create a better society. Our Vice Chancellor, Professor Dayanand Sidwatam, has always encouraged us to be divergent thinkers and pursue multidisciplinary research. We thank him for sowing the seeds of curiosity in us. True leaders don't create followers, they create more leaders. I would like to thank Dr. K.N.S. Acharya, our Pro-Vice Chancellor, for bringing out the leader in each one of us. In days leading up to the conference, you have inspired us, sir, to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more. We thank you, sir, and know that you will continue to be our greatest support. Our Dean, Dr. Kamaya Bandi, has immense belief in our vision and purpose of the School of Humanities and Social Sciences. He has championed our cause several times. We thank him for being the wind beneath our wings. I also take this opportunity to record my sincerest gratitude to our director, Dr. Madhavi I, who has never told us that things cannot happen, but always found a way to make things happen. I also thank the directors, heads of schools of technology, sciences, business, the director of student affairs, the head of HR, each and every faculty member from different schools who are present here for your continued support. Our conveners, conference committee members, all our faculty at GITAM School of Humanities and Social Sciences, Our student volunteers, our MCs today, all of you have been incredible in this journey. Each and every one of you has gone out of their way to make this day happen. I thank you all, but we all have miles to go before we sleep, and I know that we shall continue to rise to the occasion. I would also like to place on record my thanks to the several teams that have been helping us pre-conference and will be helping us for the next few days, including the AVS team, the CATS team, hospitality, and all other support staff who've been taking very good care of us and will be extending their support for the next 2 days. Once again, thanks to all of you for being a part of this conference and for helping us create new narratives of modernity. We hope you have a very engaging next 2 days of the conference. Thank you all. I request Dr. Tejal to please come and announce some of our hospitality and housekeeping details.
Good morning, everyone. The housekeeping rules for this conference are as follows, and I kindly request you to please pay attention. I request the chairs, paper presenters, and participants to be mindful of the time for each session they are part of. Sessions will typically run for 1.5 hours with 15 minutes given to each presenter, followed by a Q&A. While you are free to attend any session and even switch between sessions, we request you to avoid leaving the room while a presenter is speaking. We request you to please look at your conference booklets. They are placed in your conference kits, and please avoid misplacing them. These booklets have all details regarding the parallel sessions that will be going on, their respective venues, their scheduled timings, and the breaks in between. At any point in time, there will be 4 parallel panel sessions going on in 4 venues in the adjacent building called as the Visvesriya Bhavan. We are currently situated in Shivaji Bhavan, but all our sessions will be taking place in the adjacent building called as the VB Bhavan. There we have 4 venues in which these parallel sessions will be going on. We have the first venue on the first floor, that is the boardroom, VB boardroom, and then we have 3 more venues, the seminar hall, Smart Classroom 310, Smart Classroom 311, all situated on the 3rd floor. So please note that none of the sessions will be happening in this building. Soon after this inaugural session, we will have the high tea served outside the auditorium towards my left. Rest of the tea and coffee breaks will mostly be observed in VB Bhavan itself. But we will have the lunch and dinner served in Grace's Hall in Shivaji Bhavan, which is very close to this auditorium. We will guide you in that respect. We also have placed 3 food coupons in your conference kits. Why 3? Because we have 1 for lunch today, 1 for dinner tonight, and 1 for lunch tomorrow. Please do not misplace these. We request you to carry these coupons when you come from VB Bhavan for lunch to Grace's Hall here in Shivaji Bhavan. Spot registration participants and anyone else who has not received these coupons can please get in touch with Dr. Murli. He is standing right there. Finally, we believe that punctuality is not just being on time, but it's basically about respecting your own commitments. Hence, we request you all to please closely follow the schedule and be on time when a session starts, especially when you're returning from your lunch and tea breaks. Thank you for your patient listening.
Thank you, Shweta ma'am, for enumerating all the generous people without whom this conference would not have been possible. And
also, for your information, after the high tea, we will have the keynote speaker session here itself in Shivaji Bhavan, and after this, we will move for all the parallel sessions to VB Bhavan. Thank you.
thank you, ma'am. On behalf of GSHS Bengaluru, We thank you for joining us for our first international conference on Modernities Redefined, Perspectives from South Asia. We look forward to hosting you on our campus over the next 2 days while engaging with various unexplored ideas on the topic of modernity and beyond. Now please join us for high tea in Grace's Hall. We will reconvene here at 10:45 a.m. for the first keynote address of the conference by Professor Saurabh Dubey, Professor Researcher at El Colegio de Mexico.
Scholar and thinker whose seminal work combines history and anthropology, archival and field research, subaltern studies and post-colonial decolonial perspectives, social theory and critical thought. Born in Delhi, Professor Dubey received his Bachelor of Arts in History from St. Stephen's College, Delhi, Masters and MPhil from University of Delhi, and he holds a prestigious PhD degree in History from University of Cambridge. He is a professor researcher in the Center for Asian and African Studies at El Colegio de Mexico in Mexico City since 1995. Since 2005, he has been elected to the National Researcher Level 3, which is the highest rank in the national system of researchers in Mexico. Professor Dubey has multiple laurels to his name. In 2023, he was nominated as Distinguished Research Fellow for the next 5 years till 2027 in the inaugural edition of Max Weber Forum for South Asian Studies as part of Max Weber Stiftung of Germany. The fellowship is awarded for outstanding contributions, opening up and shaping fields of inquiry through empirical, theoretical, and methodological work on South Asian studies. He was also elected to the prestigious D.D. Kosambi Visiting Research Professorship in Interdisciplinary Research from 2017 to 2019 of Goa University in India, a chair previously held by stalwarts such as Romila Thapar, Sudhir Kakkar, Madhav Gadgil, and Shahid Amin. Professor Dubey has a gamut of published work on questions of colonialism and modernity, law and legalities, caste and community, evangelization and empire, and popular religion and subaltern art. Apart from more than 130 journal articles and book chapters, as well as a few dozen reviews, discussion pieces, and edited books, his most recent authored books include Disciplines of Modernity, Archives, History, Anthropologies, published in 2023, Subjects of Modernity, Time, Space, Disciplines, Margins, 2017, Stitches on Time, Colonial Textures and Post-Colonial Tangles, 2004, Untouchable Pasts, Religion, Identity and Power Among a Central Indian Community, 1780 to 1950, published in 1998, just to name a few. Over the years, he has been widely appreciated for his phenomenal research and setting up path-breaking conversations between scholarships on South Asia and Latin America. We welcome you once again, Professor Dubey. We are eagerly looking forward to listening to your keynote address. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that generous introduction. Can you hear me at the back? Yeah? Not too loud? It's a pleasure and honor to deliver this talk. I thank the organizers, especially Ineas, Balu, and Shweta for the invitation, and the larger administrative structure of GITAM, including Tejal, for making the visit possible. Even a quick look at the program suggests what a splendid intellectual spread lies ahead by way of all of you and what came before. And so too, this particular oration and the wider occasion carry for me a special charge, a charge that is effective and academic, emotional and intellectual. My talk is a prosaic title. It is called Modernity and Its Entanglements. Such entanglements, these enmeshments, require understanding and not dismissal. They require understanding and not dismissal. My reasons for stating this are at least threefold. First, the trouble with modernity is that we often proceed by assuming already what the M word means. That is, we know a priori what this beast or benediction called modernity implies and contains. Second, this means that modernity so I'm going to actually go off so that you don't read the text and you're not distracted. And we have images instead, which will come in later. Okay. So my talk is called Modernity and its Entanglements. These enmeshments require understanding and not dismissal. My reasons for stating this are at least threefold. First, the trouble with modernity is that we proceed. First, the trouble with modernity is that we proceed principally by assuming already what the M word means. That is, we know a priori what this beast or benediction called modernity implies and contains. Second, this means that modernity is rendered very often as a framing device, a foil to conduct our own particular exercises, express our discrete persuasions. Third and finally, overlooked thereby are the ways in which modernity is riven and driven by acute mix-ups, from the lasting conflations of modernity, modernism, and modernization, through to the multiple crossovers of time, space, and their abiding hierarchies. All this implies that it is critical to confront the elephant in the room, that category of categories, modernity. And so I begin by offering a thumbnail sketch of how I approach and apprehend modernity. The foolhardiness has a purpose, if a modest one. My bid is to proffer at once a provocation and an optic, a sort of a clearing exercise that might help the discussions and debates today and tomorrow, reconsiderations of the terms and textures of modernity in South Asia. So, without further ado, I grab the creature by its horns. Upon my reading, modernity is not the sole product of, say, Cartesian dualities, or a singular enlightenment and its aggrandizing analytics, or the imperial endeavors of the British, the French, and the Dutch after the 18th century, or indeed all of the above. Rather, the modernity of the Enlightenment with its acute interplay between race and reason came only after the modernity of the Renaissance, with its interleaving of metaphysical instrumentalism and mercantile capitalism. And so too, the constitutive violence of modernity of later colonialisms was preceded by modern genocides of the Portuguese and Spanish empires in the Americas at large. The point is that processes of modernity since the 16th century need to be approached as being constitutively contradictory, contingent, and contested. Protocols that are incessantly articulated, yet remain critically out of joint with themselves, and it pains. I'm suggesting that the Janus-faced nature of modernity, its decisive splitness, is made up of processes that are enmeshed with each other. Dispensing at once with heroic histories and dystopian totalities, at stake are requirements of checkered narratives. Thus, modernity is made up of formative conjunctions between the Renaissance and mercantilism, the age of discovery and deaths by genocide, births of democracy and expropriations of settler colonialisms, reason and race, science and slavery, industry and colony, technologies and traditions, enlightenment and empire, secularized religions and seductions of the state, figures of disenchantment and enchantments of modernity, liberty and gender, egalitarian spirits and heteronormative assumption, and critical theory and modern scholasticism. These are only a few examples. The point is that it is precisely these procedures that emerge expressed by subjects of modernity, some of whom are modern subjects, of course. Here, my reference is to historical actors who have been both subject to the processes of power and meaning of modernity, but also exactly subjects shaping these procedures. That is the two meanings of the term subject. You're subject to power, but you're also subjects who create worlds. Widening the address of modernity, the subjects who have fashioned while being subordinated to its processes include indigenous nations communities, the bearers of blackness at home and in diasporas, and other subaltern and marginal, peasant, artisan, worker class, migrant, destitute peoples, all of different sexualities across the world. Needless to say, such subjects have diversely articulated, gendered, and sexualized modern processes of colony and post-colony, empire and nation, and slavery and settler colonialism. Accompanied by middle-class and elite actors, all these subjects have registered within their measures and meanings the formative contradictions, contentions, and contingencies of modernity in non-Western and Western theaters. In a very basic sense, what I'm getting at is we discuss modernity in terms of whether it's this or that. Actually, it's this and that. This brings me to a second point. The manner in which modernity is often elided with modernization and at other times folded into modernism. Can I start this now? Isko light band karke, can we start it? Yes. Start it here? No, I think I'd like to. Okay. No, it doesn't really matter. I'll do it. Can you have the lights kind of turned down a bit? Can you see it? Can you see the images? I mean, they're not crucial. They're just going to kind of play on their own, but. Okay. This brings me to a second point, the manner in which modernity is often elided with modernization and at other times folded into modernism. As is generally known, the notion of modernization, as expressed by its different theories, refers to modular, temporal spatial projections of material organization and technological change, of economic, political, and cultural transformations. Such makeovers are principally envisioned in the looking glass of Western development. Here, different, often hierarchically ordered societies are seen as succeeding or failing to evolve from their traditional or pre-modern stages through linear stages of succession to become modernized or capitalist arenas. Now, the simplistic, step-by-step spatial schemas and the reductive, totalizing temporal templates of modernization theories have always been far too tendentious. And so too, they've been decisively questioned and firmly rejected by critical scholarship for some time now. Yeah, we don't want the light. I don't want the light. I'm just going to use the slides, gradually. No, that's all right. The modernization theories imply kind of step-by-step, simplistic spatial schemas and reductive totalizing temporal templates, which themselves have a history, and they've been far too tendentious. And it's unsurprising that they've been decisively questioned and firmly rejected by critical scholarship for some time now. Yet, motives of modernization have also carried wide resonance, easily elided with mappings of modernity, such that each shores up the other. Why should this be the case? To begin with, a crucial characteristic of pervasive articulations of Western modernity has hinged on their positing of the phenomena as marked up by a carving of space and time, a break with the past, a rupture with tradition, a surpassing of the medieval. In this scenario, the blueprints of modernization have actually distilled the designs of modernity. The aggressive spatial assumption of the latter holding in place the schematic temporal prognosis of the former. Taken together, modernity's discourses and modernization theories, inextricably entwined the one with the other, have articulated an imaginary but palpable West Europe as history and modernity, the telos of time and space, the direction of time and space for each society, culture, and people. Yet, there's more to the picture. Beyond routine representations, in artistic, intellectual, and aesthetic arenas, each understood broadly, modernity has often appeared in intimate association with its cognate or conceptual cousin, modernism. You've been seeing that for a long time. Now, modernism is also an enormously contentious term that necessarily follows from the contested and contradictory characters of the tendencies it describes. Here are to be found cultural movements, styles, and representations going back to the mid-19th century and extending into our own present, which have been diversely, and these representations, styles, movements have been diversely expressed and performed in different parts of the world. Indeed, following Theodor Adorno, modernism has been a principally qualitative rather than a merely chronological category. But it is also the case that the internal endeavors within modernisms to surpass the past, articulate the present, and envision the future have been intrinsically heterogeneous ones. These endeavors have variously engaged and interrogated, accessed and exceeded Enlightenment thought and Romantic tradition, abstract reason and religious truth, surface coherence and tonal depth, Western representations and pre-colonial narratives, the certainties of science and the presence of God, and governmental authority and popular politics. All of this raises intriguing issues concerning the configurations of time and space within the ideational articulations and aesthetic practices of modernisms. On the one hand, consider Charles Baudelaire's avowal of, quote, the ephemeral, the fugitive, the contingent, through to modernist rejections of realism and replication in favor of discontinuity and disruption. Think of Ezra Pound's invitation to art to make new, through to the many manifestations of modernisms flowing from the mid-20th century and before. A key characteristic of these distinct cultural tendencies has been to emphasize the difference of the contemporary present from past epochs. On the other hand, as Peter Childs has argued, modernism has always involved, quote, paradoxical, if not opposed trends towards revolutionary and reactionary positions. Fear of the new and delight at the disappearance of the old, nihilism and fanatical enthusiasm, creativity and despair, unquote. Now, to hold together the discourses of modernity and the articulations of modernism, is not only to trace the interleaving yet distinct ways in which they each offer a cessation and overcoming of the past. It is also to register that the contradictions and contentions of modernisms can hold a mirror up to the contingencies and contentions of that acutely authoritative universal, modernity. Such coordinates turn upon space and time. I'm suggesting that to track the entanglements between modernity, modernism, and modernization requires a double move. Here, the one is not simply folded into the other, and yet their mutual linkages are adequately acknowledged. This can have critical consequences. For modernity is now understood not only as a forceful idea and ideology, an image, but as also entailing acutely heterogeneous histories and plural processes. As noted, these imaginings and procedures extend back to the last 5 centuries and interlock in critical ways. Thus, models of modernization and movements of modernism appear as crucial components, yet small parts in the broader articulation of modernity. There are at least 2 faces to the phenomena, each insinuated in the other. Intrinsic to each is a querying of pervasive procedures of the temporalization of space and the spatialization of time. On the one hand, as part of a familiar picture, constitutive of modernity are processes of reason and science, industry and technology, commerce and consumption, nation state and citizen subject, public spheres and private spaces, and secularized religions of disenchanted knowledges. Here, it warrants emphasis that vigilance is required regarding the endless unfolding of these developments as inexorable narratives. For such heroic histories themselves segregate space and hierarchize time through the positing of a discrete beginning and an inevitable end. Indeed, instead of teleological tales of the march of modernization modernity, such stories require being unraveled as rather more checkered narratives, even as models of modernization are registered as part of the protocols of modernity. On the other hand, as was indicated, at the core of modernity are acute processes of empires and colonies, race and genocide, resurgent faiths and rarefied traditions, disciplinary regimes and subaltern subjects, and seductions of the state and enchantments of the modern. Lessons learned from the split, Janus-faced nature of modernism assume salience here. This is to register at once that ceaseless portrayals of modernity as embodying a singular, seamless trajectory are actually shored up by hierarchical presumptions and antinomian projections of space and time. And procedures of modernity have been contradictory, contingent, and contested. Protocols that are incessantly articulated, yet also out of joint with themselves. It is precisely these procedures that emerge expressed by subjects of modernity, subjects I intimated earlier. The point now is the following. At stake in this discussion of subjects of modernity are key questions of heterogeneous yet coeval temporalities and overlapping but contending productions of space. First, it is well known that conceptions of modernity generally proceed by envisioning the phenomenon in the image of the European and Euro-American, frequently implicitly male modern subject. On the contrary, I'm indicating the inadequacy of conflating the modern subject with the subject of modernity. Is it perhaps the case, then, that my articulation of subjects of modernity productively widens the range of address of modernity and its participants? And that it does this by querying the hierarchies and antinomies of time and space that underlie formidable productions of a routinely timeless tradition and an endlessly dynamic modernity. Moreover, mine is not a chronological claim that everyone living in the modern age counts as a modern subject. For subjects of modernity have revealed again and again that there are different ways of being modern, now accessing and now exceeding the stipulations of the Western modern subject. Yet, all too often in fashioning themselves, subjects of modernity have also barely bothered about the Western modern subject, exactly while articulating the enduring terms of modernity. What are the implications of such recognition for weaving in distinct textures and transformations of affects and subjectivities, time and space in considerations of modernity? Finally, it bears emphasis that there are other modern subjects besides the Western ones, embodying formidable heterogeneity yet coevalness of the temporal and the spatial, the affective and the subject. Does this not suggest the need in discussions of modernity to rethink exclusive images of the modern subject in the past and the present, across non-Western arenas and Western ones, and through space and time? At stake are subjects of modernity that are subjects at large of settler colony and sexuality, slavery and desire, gender and empire, exhibitory orders and nation regimes, race and heritage, capital and memory. It is important to register such profound intersections of meaning and power. For under issue is a related weighty matter. Put simply, questions of modernity have always been bound to issues of being, becoming. These themselves have been discussed in various ways for long now. For convenience, we might distinguish between two broad opposed tendencies. On the one hand, over the past few centuries, it is the West, Europe, that has been seen as the locus and the habitus of the modern and modernity. Such a West is imaginary yet tangible, principally imaged in the image of the North Atlantic world. And it is from these arenas that modernity and the modern appear as spreading outwards to transform other, distant and marginal peoples in the mold and the wake of the West. On the other hand, such propositions have been contested by rival claims, including especially from within romanticist and anti-modernist dispositions. Here, if the modern and modernity have been often understood as intimating the fundamental fall of humanity everywhere, so too have the aggrandizements of an analytical reason been countered through procedures of a hermeneutic, a provenance. Needless to say, these contending tendencies have for long each found imaginative articulations, and I provide indicative examples from our own times broadly understood. The work of philosophers such as Jürgen Habermas and Charles Taylor, and historians such as Reinhard Koselleck and Hans-Ulrich Gumbrecht have opened up the exact terms, textures, and transformations of modernity and the modern. At the same time, they have arguably located the constitutive conditions of these phenomenon in Western Europe and Euro-America. In contrast, anti-modernist sensibilities have found innovative elaborations in, say, the critical traditionalism of Ashish Nandi in South Asia, and the querying of Eurocentric thought has been intriguingly expressed by scholars of the coloniality of knowledge, decoloniality of power, and the ontological turn in Latin America. These powerful positions raise interesting questions, yet these powerful positions variously rest also on the assumption of innocence and immaculate alterity before and outside Europe and the West, modernity and the modern. Engaging with and going beyond such prior emphases, recent work on modernity has charted new directions, departures that have served to foreground questions of modernity in academic agendas and on intellectual horizons more broadly. I indicate 4 critical trends. First and foremost, there have been works focusing on different expressions of the modern and distinct articulations of modernity as historically grounded and or culturally expressed. articulations that query a priori projections and sociological formalisms underpinning the category entity. Second, there are the studies that have diversely explored issues of early and colonial, multiple and alternative modernity and vernacular in indigenous modernities. Third, we find imaginative, ethnographic, historical, and theoretical explanations of modernity's conceptual cognates, such as globalization, capitalism, and cosmopolitanism, as well as attendant issues of state, nation, and democracy. Fourth, and finally, there have been varied explorations of the enchantments of modernity and of the magic of the modern. Enticements and magics understood not as analytical errors, but as formative of social worlds. These studies have ranged from the elaborations of the fetish of the state, the sacred character of modern sovereignty, the uncanny of capitalism, and the routine enticements of modernity, through to the secular magic of representational practices such as entertainment shows, cinema, and advertising. So where am I going with this discussion? My own suggestion concerns engaging and exceeding, taking forward and departing from such concerns in our own manners. To start off, it is salient to address the queries and concepts entailed in earlier explorations of the modern and recent reconsiderations of modernity. It's important to address the questions which have been raised already. Yet it is also to do so by focusing on a clutch of common and critical questions. These issues turn on the everyday elaborations of the modern, the quotidian configurations of modernity. Next, rather than simply asserting the empirical plurality of modernity and the modern, it is critical to register the routine, even banal expressions of the modern as registering contingency, contradiction, and contention. Contingency, contention, and contradiction as present at the core of modernity. Further, it only follows that the bid should not be to easily, indolently exercise aggrandizing representations of modernity as the West. Rather, it is crucial to prudently track the play of such projections in the commonplace unravelings of the modern, including in South Asia today. Finally, such procedures rework broad questions of cosmopolitanism and globalization, state and citizenship, Eurocentrism and nativism, aesthetics and authority. The recasting of these questions does not only involve approaching them through routine renderings of the modern in contemporary South Asia. The retelling also stays with the dense, exact expressions of modernity, yet all the while attending to their larger critical implications, prudently thinking both down to the ground. How am I doing for time? Someone? Am I all right? Okay. Since no one has objected yet, to stay with such spirit is to aim towards specific renderings and focused rethinking of key categories and processes. Two exact instances. Consider concepts and processes of power and politics alongside those of community and identity. Here, neither power nor politics ought to signify solely institutional relations of authority centering on the state and its subjects. Rather, the more meaningful bid can be to articulate those intimate arrangements of authority, those diffuse domains of desire, their seductions and subversions. Actually, as parts of such force fields, state and government, their policy and program might now assume twin dimensions in understandings of modern subjects and subjects of modernity. Here can be found densely embodied disciplinary techniques toward forming and transforming subject citizens. All of it abounds and has abounded for some time now. Alongside such protocols and their reworking by citizen subjects, no less register the shaping, such protocols no less register the shaping of authority by anxiety, uncertainty, and alterity, of the structuring of command by deferral, difference, and displacement. At the same time, it is central to approach community and identity as modern processes of meaning and authority, located at the core of nation and globalization. This is to say that instead of approaching identity and community as already given entities that are principally antithetical to modernity, we need to explore communities and identities as wide-ranging processes of formations of subjects, expressing collective groupings and particular personhoods. Defined within social relationships of production and reproduction, appropriation and approbation, and power and difference, emergent identities, cultural communities, and their mutations appear now as essential elements in the quotidian constitution, expressions, and transformations of modern subjects. There's a larger purpose in such endeavor. A larger purpose in such madness. This is better expressed as a question. What does it mean? What does it mean to rethink the human sciences as disciplines of modernity, bearing the archival tracks of its protocols and procedures? Beginning with the Enlightenment and Romanticism, historical and anthropological knowledges, for instance, each appeared as mutually, if variously shaped by overarching distinctions between the primitive native and the civilized modern. It followed that the wide-ranging dynamics of empire and nation, it's not just empire, it's actually the wide-ranging dynamic of empire and nation, race and reason, and analytical and hermeneutical orientations underlay the fraught emergence of the human sciences as institutionalized inquiries in the second half of the 19th century. And so too, across most of the 20th century and through its wider upheavals, it was by attempting to uneasily break with these genealogies, yet never fully escaping. Where are we? I'm there before. I've been asked to wind up by 11:40, which I will. Okay, so I just mentioned that beginning with the Enlightenment and Romanticism, historical and anthropological knowledges, for example, but the human sciences at large, each appeared as mutually, if variously shaped by the large distinctions between the primitive, native, and the civilized modern. It followed that the wide-ranging dynamic of empire and nation, race and reason, and analytical and hermeneutical orientations underlay the fraught emergence. It underlay the fraught emergence of the human sciences as institutionalized inquiries in the second half of the 19th century. And so too, across much of the 20th century and through its wider upheavals, it was by attempting to uneasily break with these genealogies, yet never fully escaping their impress, that these inquiries stake their claims as modern disciplines. This has entailed especially their discrete expressions of time and space, culture and change, tradition and modernity. The departures have been valuable. At the same time, the departures have often also been accompanied by an uncertain reproduction of the oppositions between power and difference, authority and alterity, even as the haunting antinomies between the savage native and the civilized modern have found mutating expressions within emergent hierarchies of otherness. All of this underlies the human sciences. All of this underlies the human sciences as constitutively contradictory, necessarily split, and formatively contended disciplines of modernity. As archive and practice, these disciplinary formations have at once inscribed and unraveled modernity's traces and tracks. Indeed, abiding antinomies between static traditional communities and dynamic modern societies have played a crucial role in exactly these scenarios. 3 points stand out. First, underlying the disciplinary formations of the human sciences, the broad binary between the traditional and the modern has articulated other enduring oppositions. Antinomies between ritual and rationality, myth and history, community and state, magic and the modern, east and west, and emotion and reason. Second, such antinomian procedures are salient imprints of developmental. Second, such antinomian procedures are salient imprints of developmental temporal projections, of universal natural history, of singular spatial pathways of an exclusive Western modernity. These protocols and images have done both. They have not only named and described, but objectified and reshaped the subjects of their desire and despair. Third, the actual elaborations of oppositions between enchanted traditional cultures and disenchanted modern societies have imbued them with contradictory value and contrary salience. These include ambivalences, ambiguities, and excesses of authority and alterity. Such contending attributes straddle rationalist and historicist, progressivist and romantic, and analytical and hermeneutical dispositions, post-Enlightenment thought and non-Western scholarship, and the actions and apprehensions of subjects of modernity at large. All this suggests that human scientific knowledges are far from being easily autonomous academic inquiries. Rather, they emerge densely embedded in the world. That is, as the world did. They are, in a word, disciplines of modernity. There's little innocence in the world. As we reach the end of this excursus, what are the directions that my talk might point towards? First, whichever the disciplinary formations we adopt and reject. Whatever the disciplinary formations we adopt and reject, it is critical to think through their presumptions and productivities, complicities and segregations. Of doing so by approaching them as, well, the disciplines and archives of modernity. Second, at stake are acute limits of readily splitting apart the knowing subject from the object of inquiry. Instead, might we approach such subject and object by considering them conjointly, even uneasily? Might we do so by tracking their mutual illuminations, and interrogations of each other? The ways in which these knowledges, practices come together and fall apart. Third, I keep in view here future genealogies of ethnographic, historical, and other accounts of emergent worlds, made and unmade by precarities and pandemics, the non-human and the Anthropocene. In such accounts and their genealogies, analytical optics, objects of knowledge, and knowing subjects usefully inhabit shared frames and common fields. They hold up mutual mirrors to each other. Fourth, what happens when modernity is approached as expressly entailing experiential and historical meanings and motivations, perceptions and practices, and symbols and rituals, all intimately bound to formations of power, meaning, and their negotiations? Defined by such dominant, dissonant attributes, in what way do communities and identities lie at the core of social worlds and their transformation, shaped by, as well as shaping terrains and subjects, human and non-human? Fifth and finally, I bring matters home. What of ethically eschewing, abandoning repeated performances of the sheer novelty of the author's analyses? What of ethically eschewing, abandoning repeated performances of the sheer novelty of the author's analyses, the shining brilliance of our own ideas? In a word, we need to be wary of the contemporary arrogance that celebrates the uniqueness of our own knowledges and times, as Michel Rolf-Trouillot reminded us shortly before his death. Instead, it is important to be vigilant of the burdens of the past, the uncomforts of the present, the contentions of posterity. For it is in these ways that we might better respond to that probing quotidian question that are said to have punctuated the philosopher Maurice Merleau-Ponty's seminars. Interrupting particularly abstruse discussions, Merleau-Ponty would ask the seminar, its participants, including himself, where are we? What time is it? Thank you.
We are indeed privileged to have listened to your brilliant and engaging talk on modernity and its entanglements. The floor is now open for questions, comments, and observations. And because we are running late, we'll only take a few questions.
So, should we group them together? I have a tendency to talk a lot. So it's better if we it's kind of, I get excited and then I go on. So there is Aditya, right? Yeah. And?
Thank you, Professor Dubey. I'll try to keep the question very short. You remarked in one of your excerpts of your talk that modernity has contingency, contention, and contradictions.
Yes.
Now, what I'm trying to ask is that, given Sudipta Kaviraj's idea of fuzzy communities, what does this contentious, contingent, and contradictory modernity do to this fuzzy communities, especially in spaces like South Asia?
Come again?
What does the contingent, contentious, and contradictory modernity do to the conception of fuzzy communities in South Asia?
It points to the fact that perhaps, I have learned much from Sudipta, but it perhaps points to the fact that there is something a little too straightforward about that move from fuzzy to enumerated communities. It points to the fact that there are actually, other stories, other silsilas that might be at stake there. And it's sort of, among many, other scholars. I think the question is also what happens, for example, to the formations of caste sects such as Satnamis or Mahima Dharmis, or groups such as the Dangs, the communities in the making, but they don't exactly accede to, they don't exactly, make themselves perform that move between the fuzzy and the enumerated. There's much to, which was expressed there, and much which was, much which was productive. But at the same time, to register the productivities of something is not to also recognize the ways, the presumptions which uphold that argument.
Hi.
Could you also kind of identify? Yeah, please identify yourself.
This is Yaswant Singh.
Hi.
I'm faculty in Department of Sociology. So, what time it is, what time we are living in? I think we are living in a nuclear age, nuclear weapons, climate change, artificial intelligence. And in these times, do you think that this relationship between modernity and the larger idea of cosmos have largely gone in a deterministic direction where all other alternatives have been rendered, if not meaningless, very, very in a weak position? And how do you see that direction in which we are heading?
I'll partly relate it to the last question. If we're looking for alternatives that are outside, forget, whether we're using modernity, modern M word, any description. If you were to look for alternatives that are beyond structures of power, you're also looking at them outside, those terms and terrains of meaning. It's a conceit we have that we want our alternatives to be pure. We want our subalterns to be innocent. That's not, of cosmos, which is different. I actually think that it's about registering what are our complicities, okay? I mean, when social subjects believe, they do so with certain persuasion. But what is our responsibility as whatever we are, right? With a certain responsibility. Are we to keep looking for these alternatives which embody a kind of an innocent alterity? I don't think that innocence, that alterity has ever existed.
Hello, Dr. Saurabh. Myself, Alina Sebastian. I'm a faculty from NIAS, Bangalore. When we look at modernity from a South Asian perspective, or even from the context of India, we see that we experience modernity mainly through the project of colonialism. And in that context, if you also take a decolonial understanding of the decolonial perspective of modernity, it kind of makes us very critical about the whole idea of coloniality of power, which continued to pervade even in the post-colonial phase. And if that is the case, is it important that we should recenter modernity as a point of entry? But isn't it more important for scholars from the global South to recenter coloniality as the focus of entry point, so that we can have a much more critical perspective on the idea of modernity?
Okay, so I'm going to be very quick about answering this because, we don't have that much time. So I've actually, worked with several, at least some of the important sort of proponents or theorists related to the decolonial. When they pointed towards, a lot of what I was saying about the importance of the empires of Spain and the Portuguese, about the Renaissance has come, from that direction. But at the same time, when you go into system building, so what's my problem? What's my problem? I'm sorry, I'm getting animated with the coloniality of power. It's too seamless. It is too uninterrupted. It overlooks, and this is not just an empirical, but a critical conceptual question, what it overlooks are the formations of settler colonialisms and the divergent histories that they may have from slavery. What they forget is the slavery, and this is not just about the empirical, but even more, what is missed out in that picture is, what about the bleeding nation? And I mean the bleeding nation. If everything is the colonial, what about the complicities of the nation? What's happening in the world today? If you're speaking about, the genocides, if you're speaking about, in the current world, yes, there are elements of, there are elements of the colonial, but I think the beast at large is the nation. Okay? So, when are we can have our own preferences. I began by saying that. We can have our own, but, where, what is the sort of search for purity of an epistemological kind about? We can do it. We are privileged. We are academics, right? But what about getting a little real and dirty and recognizing the complicities of our own tracks? Hi.
Hello, Professor Dubey. Thank you so much for the talk. I'm Mithilesh Kumar. I'm a faculty in Christ University in Department of English and Cultural Studies. My question is on time and modernity's relationship and constituting of time. When I was listening to you, it just appeared, I may be wrong, there was a refrain as if modernity's relationship with time past is much more secure. And in the initial periods of modernity, it seemed that the projection of the future was also, in a way, on the horizon. But right now, in the times that we live in, do you think that our relationship with time is changing vis-a-vis the projection towards the future? While the past is seen to be more and more secure, or at least contentiously secure, the future seems to be receding. So do you think that the current modernity is where time future is largely under question?
You know, I go back to the point about, thank you very much for the question. I go back to the entire question of subjects of modernity. And, you know, who are we? Who are we thinking about when we talk about modernity's relationship with the future? You know, what are the imaginings of past, present, and histories, which, if we look at modernity as concrete sets of interlocking historical processes, its subjects of modernity have included Dalits, it's included Adivasis, okay? And they may have imagined futures as receding, as, you know, it's not this game of football which we think we reduce modernity to, right? I mean, you know, that they're center backs and then they're center forwards and so on, and there's a movement forward. So, you know, if I'm understanding your argument, you're saying that earlier there was a kind of a security about modernity moving forward. Today, we are in a world where, you know, the horizons of modernity are in a sense receding. Now, to me, you know, it's an interesting question if we put it, you know, if it's, you know, about this aspect of the receding horizon, but horizons have receded all the time in lives of concrete of actual historical subjects, of subjects of modernity. Now, you know, and what I'm doing is try to say that can we actually rethink the presumptions with which we approach these questions? What are we exactly thinking of? Which historical subject? Which subjects of modernity? You know, modernity where? Which aspect of it? Is that, you know, I mean, I actually think that there are deep questions about the world was never, you know, as disenchanted as it's made out to be. You know, there are actually questions about, you know, the world wasn't sort of moving forward into this disenchanted domain. What about actually something Dilip and I were taught about one time, which I learned from Christopher Hill's Levelers and Diggers. You know, for them, God had not been banished somewhere else. God existed. And, you know, their belief in God existing in the world was, you know, not some kind of a distant sort of horizon. It was present. And what happened? You know, that great architect of modernity, Locke, he didn't like these dissenters, right? So what I'm trying to say is what happens to the notion of the world in some senses containing, you know, value properties which exist in the world and which make claims upon us, right? You know, where is that kind of disenchantment there? What happens if you register this? What happens to the fact that cosmovisions are not just somewhere outside, they've existed in worlds. Worlds are much more mixed up. And it's a plea actually for recognizing our own smallness, as it were, before, you know, our with modesty, in terms of the empirical, historical, but also the critical, conceptual, you know, worlds which exist outside. You know, I see because there's so much to be learned, only if we learn not to pronounce. We unlearn to pronounce.
Hello, Professor Dubey. My name is Ardra. I teach political science here in Christ University, Bangalore. I was just wondering about a phrase that you mentioned about kind of temporalizing the spatiality and kind of, you know, spatializing time. So I was just wondering, it seemed like a key phrase to me, whether you talked about, you know, like a relationship that is constitutive, that's not just, you know, like temporary between modernity, modernization and modernism. That's kind of, I think it's a provocative step to think along those lines. So I was just wondering, could you just care to explain a little bit along those lines?
Right. So, with that, what happens is that whereas modernization projects a certain development narrative, a certain developmental imaginary, which is about moving forward. Look, and it's a constituent way in which it suffuses in particular dominant imaginings of modernity. Classic example actually being Jürgen Habermas, okay? Habermas can open reason to its embodied aspects. And yet, what happens when when he does that? What happens is that he believes that there's a certain consensus built in the very telos of language. It's a movement forward, Arguments break down, Zygmunt Bauman put it very well once. He said, he said that, and this is related to your question and the discussion, he said, in the world, according to Habermas, he conceives of the world like a sociology seminar. So there are only participants in discussions, and what matters is the force of argument, and in the end, there's consensus. Whether or not it's over the beer or coffee, there's always consensus. So what I'm getting at over there is that sort of that sort of a movement forward, and that relates to the previous question as well, that sort of a movement forward in terms of consensus is something which comes out of a certainty that a certain idea of a development idea of time and space, right? That suffuses, for example, modernization, which enters modernity theory, and yet consider modernism. And that is what I was trying to do with the images in some senses. What they recognize, and not just the artists, not just the artists, but critics, people trying to actually face getting involved with modernist works, realize that time is fractured. That spaces are made on canvases and in performances. So can we actually look at not just the influence which modernization, and its determinations cast upon modernity, but also look at practices. Modernization is a part of modernity, but so is modernism, acutely so. A lot of the discussions, I wanted to talk about this, but there wasn't time. A lot of the discussions of modernity came onto in the social sciences, and be corrected on this, actually came onto the scene after the fall of the wall, after the fall of the Berlin Wall. That's where, and it was about the discussion of the excesses of the post in postmodernism, which led to a neo-discussion of modernity. But a lot of critical scholarship realized now that that Valhalla was gone, right? With the collapse of Soviet-style communism. So questions of modernity are raised, and yet, who actually brought in the question of modernity in an influential way in the 1980s? It was all that is fluid melts into air, and that's a decidedly modernist discussion, and that has much greater fluidity. So, it is also in relation to the question which you asked, those certainties of modernity as looking forward to a particular preferred place. This has been questioned again and again. This has been questioned again and again. And again, what I want to say is that it makes us rethink. If we just bring a certain attitude and openness, it makes us rethink so much. It makes us, the images there were juxtaposing. I mean, there was, there was Tagore's nephew over there who's creating new forms which are around the same time as Picasso is, and actually exceeding Picasso in some senses. There's a subaltern modernism of which came in fortunately at a particular moment of Ramkinkar Bej, right? The Santal family. Now he's both. There's a kind of it's a subaltern modernism. There's a certain recuperative paternalist quality about it, but Ramkinkar Bej is also shaking up so much of the certainties, So, yeah, sorry, I told you. But thanks, am I making sense there? So the temporalization and spatialization of space and time, they they proceed together. We've often thought of these narratives as in terms of the temporal. Can we actually look at the spatial? How is the non-West marked out, whether as a space of, damnation and doom, or as a space of innate alterity and promises? What I've been saying is that innateness is not of the world, or at least should not be.
Okay. There will be no more questions after this. Any other questions will be taken during the tea break.
Now I would like to invite Tejul ma'am to make some important announcements.
So each of the 4 venues, as I had already mentioned, they will be having designated faculty in charges and student volunteers. They'll be there to help you if you have any queries, all right? And we are also setting up a help desk on the 3rd floor in front of the seminar hall. Again, all of this is in the VB Bhavan, that is called Visvesriya Bhavan, all right? So we will be having a help desk there. You can ask any queries, fine. With respect to certificates, and we will only be distributing the certificates during the valedictory session that will happen tomorrow. And please look at your name tags, whatever your name is printed here on this is how your name will appear on the certificate. If you want any changes to be made, please contact the registration team. We have Professor Subhashri here with us. You will have to get in touch with her. And with respect to any other queries regarding certificates, you can always get in touch with Professor Anjali as well. All right. Now we will have a very short break, a very, very short break, because we have to move to the next building for our sessions. So tea will be served here again, where we had the high tea. But this will be a really short break, and I request you all to please be punctual and move to VB Bhavan for your respective panel sessions. And we really thank you, Professor Dubey, for this wonderful, enlightening keynote session. You are the best person who could have delivered this. Thank you so much, sir.
We thank you all for your presence, and we look forward to your sustained engagement with GSHS and GITAM. Have a nice day.